many of you, lower your hands, how many of you are here because you didn't really want to be and you were dragged here? Raise your hand. Yeah. Thank you for your honesty. I hope to intrigue you, interest you, and many of us have done a keto or low carb diet for ages, or years, decades, and Jackie, who was one of my teachers, Jackie Eberstein, worked with Dr. Atkins for 30 years and was one of my teachers as we were developing this program. And Jackie actually is a major part of the educational program of the Keto clinics. So thank you for that, Jackie. And so the main action item that I would like you to consider, and maybe you can take action tonight, is if you go to healclinics.com. Everyone who has a smartphone, please do that. Nobody's taking their smartphones. You go to healclinics.com/offering. What you will see is a unique opportunity. In fact, you couldn't do this 2 years ago, to invest in a company by clicking a button online and swiping your credit card. I was actually pretty amazed as one of the first investors on this online public offering. I went to this website or to the site on your smartphone and I typed in my information, and for, I put in $1,000, I could put in my credit card information and I became an owner of the company. So you actually buy shares of stock in the company. Now, I want to convince you in just 1 minute that this is like buying IBM or Apple or some stock when it's just starting up, and that if intended the growth we want, because it's such a new thing, that you will be getting in on the ground floor on a great sort of company. And so it's not giving away money. So have you heard of Kickstarter, where you buy the product, and the kids do that today to buy the product early? That's not what this is. This is actually owning stock in the company. So if you were dragged here, but you're an entrepreneur and you have a lot of money that you want to invest, that's a good thing. Maybe that's why you were brought here. But actually, with as little as $480, you can purchase stock in the Heal clinics. And so the first thing I need to just explain is that this is not funding a nonprofit on TV, like the PBS, asking you for money. This is actually buying stock in a company. So how many, well, I know several of you have already purchased stock in the company, so consider that. And I'll be watching moment by moment how many people have, but actually you can see, in fact, did anyone pull up how many people have invested so far? I think the 328, yeah, thank you for raising your hands. 328 people have invested an average of $1,000 each. So that comes to a total of $328,000 that we've raised over the last 6 weeks. And there's only like 8 or 10 days left. Could be 16, thank you. Yeah. So I got on the Jimmy Moore and then the Two Keto Dudes podcasts, and those have gotten the word out quite a bit. But many of you are on the ground floor and been affected in a positive way by this. And so most investors tell me that they've invested because they want to give something back. They want to make it so that the next person doesn't have to search and find the doctor in the area or not get access to this kind of information. So consider investing in the Heal Clinics/offering, and I'll check in a couple hours to see how many of you have actually, no. Well, I'm checking. This is a terrible addiction now, right? Watching the numbers go up over time. And so the whole idea there is to scale up to increase the availability of the keto, low carb teaching and fixing diabetes and obesity. And another way I phrase it is like we're developing relief workers to help when there's an epidemic. So when you really step back, there's an epidemic of diabetes and obesity, and who's getting upset about it? Who's saying that you don't have to have diabetes, do this? Well, that's the Heal Clinics. You don't have to have type 2 diabetes. So thanks for coming out tonight and considering investing in the Keto clinics. And so it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Jackie Eberstein, And I remember sitting in her clinic in 1998 in New York City, and seeing patients side by side, and you were gracious enough to allow me to learn from you and Dr. Atkins. And then I wrote a letter, we got a phone call, and then gave a little request for a study. I think it was like $50,000, and Dr. Atkins writes a check, personal check to do the study. We go back to here to Durham, North Carolina. First study looked good, so I went back and we need to do another one. Dr. Atkins, created a foundation that funded the second study that was in the Annals of Internal Medicine, which is the highest internal medicine journal. Of course, this is now 2004. The studies are coming out, and Dr. Atkins slips on the ice, passes away, the clinic closes, and I ask you to come back to help with the HEAL clinics to get this going, and you just can't not do it, huh? So thank you for coming. Thank you for coming down to Durham, and I hope you enjoy Jackie Eberstein's view tonight, and I hope you can answer a few questions. Sure. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Okay, I need to be organized. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Nice looking group. Okay. So I'm not going to talk to you about making New Year's resolutions, because everybody knows that you do that for a short period of time and then you stop. So what I do want to talk to you about is making a low-carb keto diet a lifelong lifestyle, because that's the only way you're really going to manage your weight forever, maintain your health, or regain your health. Or if you're young enough and you're not sick yet, invest in your future health. Because this is the only body you're going to get. So you really need to take care of it. So I'm going to talk about that and hopefully give you some ideas on an understanding of some of the habits you may have had in the past that keep getting you off track. You yo-yo diet, you weight cycle, you gain and you lose, and you gain and you lose. And unfortunately, when you regain, you usually gain more than you had lost. So you're just creeping up. So what I want to do is have you have a better understanding of how that happens and how you can begin to change that. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Eric already told you a fair amount. I did work with Dr. Atkins. Started working with him in 1974. I was in my mid-20s. I started dieting when I was 12 because I was a terrible carb addict. I was born a carb addict, I think. And I was always gaining and losing and gaining and losing. Not much weight because I had diabetes in my family and I have morbid obesity in my family. And as a nurse, I knew if I didn't get a handle on that at some point in my life, I was really going to be in trouble. And I did not want diabetes. So I would keep my weight fairly stable, but going up and down and trying, low calories or just not eating. Things like that, which is what most people have probably tried to do, until I found Dr. Atkins, and I went on a low-carb diet and realized how easy it was to do. It also took care of a medical issue I had that was undiagnosed, where I would get numerous symptoms that were very unpleasant. It turned out I had a very unstable blood sugar, which some of you may know. Hypoglycemia, or an unstable blood sugar, is an early stage of what would become diabetes. And so I can thank Dr. Atkins for making that diagnosis so that I learned what to do. So many years later, I still have a very good A1C, my blood sugars are good, and chances are I will never get diabetes. I do lecture a lot. I've done the low-carb cruises. We did 11 Atkins cruises that I designed and lectured. I've done Jimmy Moore's cruises and a number of other lectures. Co-authored Atkins Diabetes Revolution. After Dr. Atkins died in 2003, I worked for the Atkins Nutritional Food Company in their medical education department and co-authored a book, Atkins Diabetes Revolution. And then, of course, I met Dr. Westman in 1989, and the rest is history. We can thank Dr. Westman for having the interest and the courage enough to be willing to do a study and to get it published using the Atkins name. because in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even now, the Atkins name is taboo to some people. But he knew that it worked, and he was willing to do that. And of course, now we've got a great deal of research to support the safety and efficacy of what we're doing. And then he twisted my arm in 2014 to get me to join HEAL. And I am director of the clinical protocol, and I'm still here working with Eric. And we do have fun, I think. Okay, HEAL Care. Well, the Eric Westman, Jackie Eberstein method. I didn't make that up, somebody did. But between myself and Eric, we have significant clinical experience. I've had, well, since 1974, and Eric has been doing this for a number of years. So clinical experience can be different than, what you read in the books, because you have to be able to individualize things for your patients, even within the scope of a 20-gram keto diet you do. So HEAL Care for Life is three components. First of all, there's a non-medical, where you can join HEAL, and if you don't have diabetes on medication, if you have a body mass index that's below 50, or you're not doing, your blood pressure is well controlled, and you have a doctor who will monitor your medications, you possibly could be a non-medical client of HEAL. However, if you're on meds for diabetes, or have numerous meds for blood pressure, or your body mass index is 50 or higher, then we do require that you come to HEAL Clinic if you want to join us, so that we can monitor you properly. How many people in here don't know that you have to cut diabetes meds when you cut your carbs? Who don't know, who think it's okay to continue? Well, it's not okay. So I'll caution you. Because your diabetes meds are titrated to the amount of carbohydrate in your diet, and most doctors don't believe people will cut out much carbs, so the American Diabetes Association, up until fairly recently, recommends up to 60% carbohydrates, and they give you enough drugs to take care of the carbs that you eat. And so when you're going to do low carb, it's going to be very important that you get your meds cut. So we don't want you passing it on the floor somewhere, okay? So that's why you would be in a medical program. You need someone who understands how to cut the drugs. And Dr. Westman trains our medical personnel in the clinics in how to safely taper the drugs. We also have commitment coaching, and that's something I'll talk about in a second. But each of you, with your medical and non-medical, gets assigned a partner. And that person is there to help you through the whole process with your diet. They're available to you every 2 weeks. You have a remote visit with them on the phone. You can text them, you can call them, you can email them. You can even, as part of HEAL, email me. It's called Ask Jacqueline. And if you have a question, you can email me. So what we want to do is give you the most amount of support to succeed in making this a permanent lifestyle. And all the research has shown, no matter what diet you use, that if you have a support system, you're more likely to succeed, especially in the kind of food environment we have, and how readily people like to share a lot of negative things when you're trying to lose weight. So we do have commitment coaching, in addition to one-on-one partnering. It's done remotely in small groups, and you have a certified commitment coach lead the group. This is not therapy. It's not psychoanalysis. It's there to assist you in changing the behaviors you need to change in order to get the goals that you want in your life. And it's very helpful. A lot of people really enjoy it. So where do I start? I already reviewed part of this, that if you're on insulin or other blood glucose meds, if you're on blood pressure meds, if your body mass index is 50 or higher, you need to be medically supervised. And commitment coaching in the non-medical program will also include the commitment coaching. So keto is easy. It's really not that complex to understand. It's the doing of it that requires some work. So that's what I really do want to talk about today. Excuse me. My allergies are not good. So why do people fail on diets and keep going on and off? So while I'm going through this, what you might want to do is think about the times when you were really being successful and suddenly you weren't and you can't quite figure out how that happened. You fell off the wagon and you don't really know why. So some of that you may begin to see yourself here. And once you understand what may have been going on, then you can create a strategy to help you not to do that anymore. And in the long run, that is how you're going to succeed, is to change your behavior. So old habits, you carry old habits with you to your new diets. And as soon as you don't get the result you want, you're off your diet because you think, well, this diet doesn't work for me. Or you start cheating. And or you don't even really understand your diet. There can be a lot of reasons there. Without stopping and realizing maybe it's not the diet, maybe it's me, maybe it's the way I look at dieting, and maybe it's I'm using the wrong information about how a diet should work and how my body works. So that's something to think about, because that's very common in a lot of people. You may be discouraged to try another diet by your family and your friends. I mean, I've heard it from my patients. They come in and say, well, my family's upset I'm dieting again because I'm only going to fail and I'm going to be miserable and I'm never going to lose the weight and I might as well just accept myself the way I am. And so the one thing I've often said to people is, if you had tried to quit smoking and you failed, do you think your family would discourage you from trying to quit smoking again? Or if you had an alcohol problem that was really disrupting your life, would your family tell you, oh, just keep drinking? You can't do this. Don't try it again. You're driving us all a little crazy with your program. So don't let other people vote on your health. It's your body, you're in control, don't let other people vote. And people like to vote. It may be too complicated of a program. And Dr. Westman always talks about this is simple, we want to make it simple. When you get your HEAL handbook, it's simple. And then you have a partner in commitment coaching to help you through the rough patches, if you have it. But there's a lot of incorrect and confusing information, especially on the internet, and especially still about keto. I just read some of these statements and, you know, Dr. Atkins did keto and we were successful since 1972 without counting macros, without your ratio of protein to fat. And people get themselves very upset about that. And it isn't necessary. We make it simple, and if you follow instructions, it will work. And if it doesn't work as well, then it's up to us as your HEAL Care partners to help make it work. And it requires patience. Anything worth doing does require patience. Carb addiction. For me, when I started doing this, I realized this was the best thing that took care of my cravings and my hunger. And there really is evidence that it is a carb addiction. You may not know, but there is evidence that shows that the area of your brain, the reward center in your brain, is the same area that gets activated from sugar as gets activated from alcohol, cocaine, heroin, and other drugs. And it's not unusual. We used to see this in Dr. Atkins' office all the time when we took histories on people. And people who had a history of alcoholism, there was usually a history of diabetes or reactive hypoglycemia in the family. There was a connection with your blood sugar, with alcohol, and also the connection of activation of your brain, your reward centers. Unrealistic expectations. This is a huge one. And it's especially unrealistic expectations around the scale. That is one of the main reasons why a lot of people quit a diet. They have this idea of what the scale is supposed to do. And it is inaccurate, and also in many cases is impossible. So that is one of the things we have to work on in HEAL, is to get people to focus on taking their measurements more than jumping on and off the scale. I used to have patients who'd weigh themselves 4 or 5 times a day. And they couldn't understand why their weight was going up as the day went on. They'd even stop eating and they just couldn't understand it. And they were so tied to scale as the only measure of success. When it didn't do what they wanted, they would give up. And that's part of the old habits applied to new diets too, people who rely so much on the scale. I'll talk a little bit about that later. The scale is the least accurate reflection of fat loss. Lack of knowledge about how your body works and how it changes over time. And I have so many people come in, particularly women, who have said, I did this 20 years ago and the weight dropped off. And now they're 45-year-old postmenopausal women who've had 3 babies. Your body will change. Women will have a more difficult time than men do because they have more significant hormone changes. And when hormone changes happen, it can affect a lot of things in the body. It doesn't mean you won't be successful. But what it means is stop comparing yourself to what used to happen. And you may have lost your weight 20 years before, but you still didn't keep it off. So it's time to turn over a new leaf, wipe the slate clean, and deal with your body the way it is. But hang in there. It will work, but it just doesn't work the way it used to. Side effects of meds are a big thing because we have a very medicated population, especially as you get older. It's not unusual for people over 65 to be on more than 5 medications at one time. And most meds can have an impact on blood sugar, on insulin, and on either causing weight gain or making it harder to lose weight. So if you're on meds, you have to take that into consideration. And if you're struggling with losing weight and your doctor wants to put you on another medication, ask him to see if a side effect is weight gain. And if it is there something else he can give you? Of course, our long-term plan for you is to get off of as many medications as you can. So it saves you from the side effects, it saves you from having drug interactions, which is very common, especially as we get older. It also saves you money. And we all know on Medicare there's a donut hole, and a lot of people fall into that donut hole by the end of the year and have to pay a lot out of pocket. And I'm sure you've all heard about the problems with insulin and the cost of insulin, and people who can't afford insulin anymore and are cutting back their doses, which of course means they're going to get sicker and they're going to get complications. So one of the big goals I've always had, and I hope you'll think about it, is to get off as many medications as you can. And there's also personal and other social risk factors in our life. This is a big one, stress. There's short-term stress and there's long-term stress. You've just been through a short-term stressful period, from Thanksgiving to New Year's, where there's food everywhere, where people are celebrating, where you're not supposed to deprive yourself. It's Christmas. Grandma made you your favorite pie. Why aren't you having it? All of those things that happen during the holidays. Vacations are the same thing. Special events are the same thing. One of the things we try to help you do is to prepare in advance for those events so that you have some strategies that you can use to stay on track, or stay at least as closely as possible on track. When your body is stressed, and stress can come from dietary stress, and a lot of people don't think of it that way. When you eat a lot of carbs, especially if you're overweight and you have insulin resistance, your blood sugar is going to go too high. And a few hours later, it will drop too low, or it will drop too fast. When that happens, especially your brain gets very unhappy. And that is going to trigger a stress response. Stress response means your hormones get higher, adrenaline, cortisol, and when that happens, it brings your blood sugar back up. Unfortunately, there's a lot of unpleasant side effects when that happens. Mood swings, irritability, depression, shaking of your hands, gastrointestinal symptoms, your insides get all riled up, you can get a headache, you may have difficulty thinking, you may get palpitations. Some people actually get atrial fibrillation, which is an irregular heartbeat in the upper chamber of the heart. Depression, panic attacks, these can all come from excess stress hormones circulating in the body. And what does your doctor do if you go into him and this is happening all the time? He'll write you a prescription. You're on a tranquilizer, you're on an antidepressant, you're on something for your gut, You're on some pain medication for your headaches. You can't sleep at night, so you're on a sleeping pill. Yet, that doesn't stop the underlying process. It doesn't stop the reason why you have your symptoms. When you deal with your diet, that's your opportunity to fix the underlying cause. So you don't need to have your doctor write your prescriptions. And after a while, you can actually stress your adrenals and you get adrenal fatigue. Because your adrenals decide, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not going to respond to this anymore because it's constant. And with the American diet, people can get blood sugars that go up and down 4, 5, or 6 times during the day. And that's not good. And it can also lead to type 2 diabetes. Now there's long-term chronic stress. And that's another issue too, because you're going to have chronically elevated cortisol levels, which affect deposition of fat in the belly. And we know that belly fat produces chemicals that create inflammation, and low-grade chronic inflammation is really part of how we get vascular disease. It's related to Alzheimer's. It's related to aging. Your skin's going to age, your insides are going to age when you have a lot of inflammatory chemicals. So that's why chronic stress really also needs to be attended to. And you need to have a way of dealing with chronic stress, because some of these things you can't fix easily. You have a family member who's ill, you may be a caretaker, you may have had a death in the family, a loss of a job, an interruption of your income, and these things may be around for a while. So if you are using food to cope with stress, this is going to become a real problem. And a lot of people are stress eaters. Some people lose their appetite when they're stressed, but far more people grab the carbs, their comfort food. And that's why if you want to succeed long term, it's really important that you have strategies to deal with stress. But do understand, the first one is staying off the carbs, so you prevent that up and down swing in your blood sugar. And then you won't be as stressed. Eating for the wrong reasons, we've already discussed stress. Because the clock says it's time to eat. Now, one of the things Dr. Westman says is you eat when you're hungry, and if you're not hungry, don't eat. And that's part of the simple message we want to give you. As long as you are feeling well in between meals and don't need to eat, don't eat. But if you are hungry, you can have a small protein and fat snack. This is not like a low-calorie diet that by dinner time you've run out of your calories, but you're hungry at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. But there isn't anything you can eat. You can certainly have a snack if you need it. You love to eat. I mean, a lot of people love to eat. We all do. But a lot of people also eat out of boredom. They don't have anything else to do, so they'll go up and look in the refrigerator or the cupboard to see what they can eat. That's a habit that if you want to succeed long term, you need to work on. And because it tastes and smells so good. I always think of that when I go into a movie theater and you walk into the lobby, and of course there's all this chocolate, but there's the smell of the popcorn in these huge containers. And so what I've been in the habit of doing for decades is to just watch what people do in movies. And a lot of times people have already had lunch, the movie's at 2 o'clock or whatever time. And so they walk in, they buy the big thing of popcorn, and they sit down, maybe it's 10, 12 minutes before the movie starts, and they're bored. So they're just, shoveling it in. Once the movie starts, they're still shoveling it in, but I'll bet you they don't taste it because they're too involved in the movie. But look at all the carbs and calories you can take in. And if that's a habit that you've developed, that's a good place to stop, right then and there, and find some other way of dealing with your boredom. Just be bored. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being bored for 10 minutes. Well, bad advice is a huge issue. I think most of us understand that our nutrition guidelines are a part of that bad advice. Some of that is beginning to shift and beginning to change, but part of our mission at HEAL is to teach people what the facts are and the research says, so that at least you can make your own decisions about your own health. Yes, you may need medical supervision for that. Hopefully you may have a physician who is open to ketogenic low carb. And I have to tell you that with the people I've now talked to, when I go over all the initial health assessments If you want to become a client of Heal, I do all of those and make the assignment for medical and non-medical. I often have to call people to get more information. And it is surprising to me how many people, number one, are referred by their doctor, or they have a doctor who is willing to work with their medications. And there's more and more and more of that. I certainly saw at a time in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s where we could get someone who came into the office who came in needing to lose weight on a number of meds, was tired, had headaches, their joints hurt, they took meds for reflux, all those diet-related disorders that we see. And they saw us for about 6 months, and their lives got better, and they got off meds, and they lost most of the weight they needed to lose, and they were feeling better, and they were participating in life. They're out mowing the lawn where they didn't do before, or you get a woman who's cleaning out her closets for the first time in 10 years because she has the energy to do it. And they went back to their doctor, and the doctor congratulated them and the weight loss and how much better they would feel. And I remember one in particular, the doctor said, "What did you do?" He said, "Well, I'm on the Atkins diet." And he told them if you're going to continue to use that dangerous diet, don't ever come back to see me again. Now, instead of being interested to see his patient getting better, he wasn't interested in that at all. Or I've had doctors say, well, it works for you, continue it. But he never used it for anybody else. So a lot of that, I think, or hope, is changing. A lot of us used to think that all these older doctors were just going to have to pass away before the younger ones would grow up. I hate to say that, but... and when I do go to the conferences like Low Carb USA or the Keto Summit or whatever, it is really nice to see medical students come to these conferences. It's wonderful to see new nurse practitioners and PAs come, new doctors come, because those are the ones that we have to get to understand that it's not about writing prescriptions. Because prescriptions in many cases don't treat the underlying cause, it just decreases the symptom. You're not necessarily getting healthier. And chances are, you're going to wind up on more drugs as you get older. So again, media can be an issue. There still can be some negative stuff about low-carb keto diets in the media. There are certain conferences where you get people who can be negative. Friends and family can also be negative. And that's one of the reasons why people don't get support by friends and family. Because they'll start to tell you all these horror stories that they read somewhere about a low-carb diet. Peer pressure is also an issue. A lot of people can be very unsupportive. So hang around with people who are supportive. Or go on a lot of the low-carb sites to get some support if you don't have anyone else. But I'll caution you, if you go on a low-carb site, sometimes you don't get accurate information. So if you're not quite sure something is right, then go back to whatever diet you're using, whatever book it is, and double check to make sure it's correct. But you really can at least get support from people who are going through the same thing you are. The food pushers. You see a lot of this over the holidays too, because people don't think there's any good reason why you should eat properly over a holiday. That little bit of apple pie, grandma slaved in the kitchen, and all that other stuff. So that's something you can learn to deal with. And most people now who know me know I just don't do those things. If we go to a dinner party or whatever, I won't have dessert. And don't expect it if you come to my house. Unless I make a low-carb pumpkin pie on Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever. I make the cauliflower mash. I don't make potatoes. And now, there's so many wonderful choices you can find on the internet or in cookbooks. So you can replace almost any treat with something low-carb. Now, if you're just starting out, you don't want that to be a major part of your diet. But if it's a holiday, then do that. But you have to make sure you're back on the very next day. And then there's jealousy of friends and spouses, and that does happen. Your friends maybe are starting to get a little jealous that you're looking better, and they're carb addicted, and they can't imagine that they could live without their carbs. So they're not really happy to see you doing so well. And you can get into issues with your spouse, and I'll tell you one story that really brought it home to me at the Atkins Center. a couple in their early 50s. She had diabetes and she already had heart disease. He was physically fine. He just had to lose about 30 pounds of his beer belly. And of course, she was on the same diet he was, but he was losing faster than she was. And he'd kind of come in and smirk because I lost 8 more pounds than you did in a month. Or accusing her of cheating when she wasn't cheating. And no matter how I tried to understand that, you know, male and female bodies are different, he just used it to kind of lord it over his wife. And so Valentine's Day came along. And they came to see me after Valentine's Day. And she was very upset with him. And I used to see them together. She was very upset with him, and I asked her why she was so upset with him. And she said, he brought me a big box of chocolates for Valentine's Day. And here's a woman with early heart disease, diabetes, and that's what he does to sabotage her program. So needless to say, I wasn't as, I don't know if the word is supportive or what. I got really upset. I asked him to leave the room and told him I would talk to him after I talked to her, which I did. And I never saw the two of them at the same time again because I wasn't going to do that. But I actually recommended them to go for counseling, family counseling, couples counseling. Because if he was willing to sabotage her health, there's really something that's not quite right in this relationship. And turns out that he was afraid that she would start to really look good and she might start wandering or would leave him. Well, frankly, she probably would get better off without him. But that wasn't my decision. I don't make those kind of decisions. Okay. So I'm just going to go through a few things that I hope will be helpful for you over time. Change your focus. Most of you, when you're on a diet, what are you focusing on? You're focusing on the scale. How rapidly am I going to lose weight? Now, you may have carried that weight for 15 years, but you'd like it gone in the first month. So if it's only a short-term goal, and losing weight is basically only a short-term goal unless you're really doing it for a good reason. So I would recommend that you also start to look at your health, and your long-term goal is your health. Because if your only goal is your weight, things can come along in life that can get you off track if it's only about weight loss. You have loss of a job, you're upset, you've got a lot of stress. Oh, I'm not going to worry about eating right now. I'll do that. I'll restart again in the future. That's going to keep repeating a cycle that you'll always find another reason to give up. So start to think about your longer-term goals. And success is not a straight path. This diagram at the bottom with losing weight, it doesn't happen that way. The scale is what you see on the right. It's up and down, it's up and down, 2 pounds up, 1 pound down. So we recommend that you only weigh yourself every 2 weeks, that you take your measurements every 2 weeks. Your measurements are a better reflection of your fat cells getting smaller. Your scale weighs a whole lot of different things. Your fluid balance affects the scale, the time of day. Women premenstrually are going to gain a few pounds. You also might start getting some cravings premenstrually after they may have disappeared once you went on a low-carb diet. Don't panic about any of that. Just do what you need to do and everything will even out once you get your period. Women take a diuretic. They lose 3 or 4 pounds and they get on the scale and they're so happy, and then 2 days later it's all back. Because you're not losing fat when you take a diuretic, you're just losing water. We want you to lose the fat, because it's the fat that's really the damaging organ when you have too much of it. So measurements. That's why when I talk to people, I ask them, what their size goal is, not their weight goal. Because your size goal is a better reflection of when you've lost enough and you're comfortable in your clothes. And if you try to get too thin, you're going to have a hard time staying there after a while. There's no big difference between being a size 4 or size 6. It's really about being healthy. And remember, when you walk away from someone, there's no neon sign on the back that flashes what size you're wearing. It's how you look, how much better you look than you used to. So that's my pet peeve, and I'm done talking about it. Okay. Find your own measurement of success. Don't take it. It's about what your needs are. So define your goals more broadly than just what the scale is, or just your blood tests, although they're important. And your goals over time may evolve as you've lost weight. You may decide you want to get more involved in a physical activity you never thought you could do. So they may evolve differently. You may want to do a lot more gardening than you did before, or try something new. So your goals can evolve as you evolve. So measurements of success that I think are important is you have less hunger and cravings without diet pills or gimmicks. People who take diet pills, I think, get psychologically dependent on them because they think that's the only thing that's cutting their appetite. And if I don't take them, I'm going to be starving again. And that's not what happens on low carb. It may be what happens on a very low calorie diet, but it's not what happens on low carb. So we don't use diet pills. Your clothes are looser. Again, it goes back to your fat cells getting smaller. Better moods. Your mood should be more even. You should be more up. You should also have less irritability and anger. All of those things that are driven by your stress hormones when your blood sugar was unstable. All that should settle down. Another one here is, I don't need my reflux medication anymore. That's a huge goal. I don't know how many of you are aware that the reflux medication is only meant to be taken for 2 to 3 months. People live on it for years. You can get osteoporosis. Men can get osteoporosis. You can have low B12 levels. If your B12 is too low, you can have a lot of other issues. And many people on low carb get off their reflux medications very quickly. Be more active. You can have less pain because you have less inflammation and your joints don't hurt as much. You may be breathing easier. Your asthma can improve. That's very common for us to see in people who do low carb. And part of it is also not just taking away the sugar or losing weight, but also getting rid of grains. Grains can be a trigger for people with allergies and asthma. Picking up and playing with your children and grandchildren. When you lose 40 pounds, you can bend down again and get up. You know, you can run after the 2-year-old toddler who can run faster than you do. So there's all these little ways you can see that your quality of life is getting better. And that's what this needs to be about if you're going to have the motivation to go long term. Now you take it day to day because that's all we can fix is day to day. But you want to look at the things you're getting that you never thought you could have again. You know, there's no reason to be exhausted when you're 40. That's not due to aging, that's due to a bad diet in most circumstances. Fewer meds, we went through this before, it could save you a heck of a lot of money. Better health and well-being and less risk factors. Those are also important, that your blood tests improve. Know what works for you and don't compare yourself to others. This is especially true when a woman and her male partner are doing this together. He's going to cheat 50% more than you did and lose twice as much weight. That's just the way it is. And I used to tell my female patients who come in and complain, I said, next time I'm coming back with a different set of hormones because I don't want to do this either. How does your body respond in the short term and long term? And we went through a lot of that. People with irritable bowel, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis can see improvement in their symptoms. And those can be very debilitating, difficult to deal with conditions. They can rule your life. Allergies, of course, can get better, except for mine. Sleep can get better. Your snoring can stop. You may be able to stop using a CPAP machine. Blood pressure can get better. Your energy, alertness. Your brain starts to work again. Your brain will function better on ketones than on glucose. There are ways of planning your meals to match your tastes and your budgets and your lifestyle, and it's much easier now than when I started. You have tons of cookbooks, you have tons of information on the internet. I'll just caution you on one thing. If you're going to pick a recipe, make sure you read the ingredients, and make sure all the ingredients are allowed on your level of your program. And also pay attention to serving size. And I wouldn't get into all the desserty stuff at the beginning. Save that for a special day, because just having even an artificial sweetener for a while can trigger some people's wanting more. So be very careful there. I know there are purists who say you shouldn't use anything with artificial sweeteners. I would not use NutraSweet and have it for years. But I use Splenda, I use stevia, but I don't use a lot of it. I'm not always constantly making desserty things, because I know for me that probably isn't a good idea. I even have trouble controlling nuts even after all this time. Take into consideration the effect of your medications. Again, they may be part of the reason why your progress is slower. Find physical activity. I agree that exercise isn't going to help you lose weight, but I do think exercise is important. It's good to maintain lean mass, bone health, and we need that as we get older. It's a very good way of coping with stress. So that's why I recommend it. And I had, this was always like pulling teeth with my patients. Once they were feeling better, their energy was better, we would bring up the E word. And, and I'd get all these, funny looks and all rolling eyes and all this stuff. Because at that point I was a runner, so they thought I was going to expect them to start running, which I wasn't. But there isn't anything I like to do, would be their comment. I said, well, then pick the thing that you hate the least. There has to be something you hate the least. And walking is a good place to start. Almost everybody can walk. Keep it simple. That's Dr. Westman wants to talk about keeping it simple. Weigh and measure only every 2 weeks. And we ask our patients to do that in the morning they're going to see their partner. Buy real food that's readily available. You don't have to do all the special stuff. I would recommend that you make a shopping list. Don't go shopping when you're hungry. And stay in the outer aisles of the grocery store. No special keto foods. People have said, well, I can't get all these low-carb products. I can't do it. We did it for decades before there were any low-carb products. And I don't really like people starting low-carb products at the very beginning. And there's some products you just don't want to use. I do use some products when I travel because it's helpful in an airport or if you're stuck in a plane or somewhere like that in an emergency, but I don't use many at all. We don't have you take food diaries, write food diaries. We don't have you measure glucose unless you have diabetes or ketones. We don't have you count calories or figure out what your macronutrient ratios are. Now we may do that if we need to troubleshoot a problem, to see, are you doing this correctly? Are you really remembering everything you've eaten? Then we may do it, but it's very simple and you don't really need to do that. Please be careful with the information out there about, in order to get very high ketones, you want to push very large amounts of fat. The coffee with the butter and all this stuff. We've had many patients, especially women, because this is going to affect them the most, is they can't do that. If you're a 30-year-old guy who's active, maybe you can. But you're not going to be able to do it when you're a hormonally challenged woman. Yes, your ketones may go up, but people are either not losing or they're even gaining a few pounds because their calorie intake is too high. We want you burning your excess body fat, not just dietary fat. And that's what's happening to a number of people who do that kind of thing. So be careful there. And we may ask someone to measure ketones, but it's not necessary in most instances. Just follow what we tell you to do and you'll see progress, but you have to be patient. And no need to count calories. Again, in most circumstances, we don't have people count calories. Follow the eating guidelines. Eat until you're satisfied but not stuffed, because you're going to get suppression of your appetite. So Eric already did talk about the public offering, so I don't need to say anything about that. There are different resources you can go to. healclinics.com. We are going to be having a special January getting started, a lot of advice section on the website. So look there. I've written a couple articles for that. And I have older articles that are on there on the website from the past. There's recipes there. So, use that as a resource. And if you want to enroll in Heal Care, you can go to Heal Clinics, download the initial health assessment, and I'll make a decision about whether you're medical or not medical. So thank you. So, Mr. Boss, do we have time for questions?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Okay. Eric, did you want to have a question? You were standing up. I wondered. No, come on.
Open up the floor.
No, come on. Anybody? This gentleman?
I have heard from a number of people who don't understand this diet, who wonder, not eating carbohydrates is dangerous. You need to eat carbohydrates. And I don't eat, I eat less than 20 carbohydrates, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really look at the fat intake much, I'm probably lower on the fat than I should be. But is there any truth to the fact that you need carbohydrates in some quantity?
No, there is no truth. So let me go back and tell you some information. That we've heard for decades. One of the reasons is someone has come up with the idea that, of course, ketones are bad, and your brain needs a certain amount of glucose to work. And nobody knows, or at least they think you need at least 130 or 120, it varies depending on what you read of, dietary carbohydrates. Number one, they want you to stay out of ketosis because they think it's bad. And number two, to fuel your brain. If you go to the Institute of Medicine website, it will tell you there is no minimum dietary requirement for carbohydrate for health. And that's the Institute of Medicine. There is essential amino acids, proteins you have to have, and essential fatty acids. Now it's funny, when they were telling people to do a very, very low-fat diet in the 80s, somehow nobody was worried about not getting the essential fats. But somehow they're worried about not getting all these essential carbohydrates. There are none. And what we know is when you are ketogenic, the brain functions very well on ketones. And actually the brain prefers ketones. And you need very little carbohydrate, it doesn't have to be dietary necessarily, because of gluconeogenesis. Our liver has the ability to make the glucose we need if we need it. And I mean, if it's true the brain doesn't work unless you have enough carbohydrate, then I'm in a great deal of trouble.
Right.
Does that kind of answer it?
Yeah.
Eric, was there anything you wanted to add to that? No? Okay, right here. Gentleman and then the lady.
Me?
You and the...
You mentioned about the blood pressure medicine.
Yes.
Like if you take Losartan, because all my other numbers went down, so I got rid of everything else, like the metformin and stuff like that.
Right.
All that. But how does that affect with the Losartan?
Well, the issue is that a lot of people who are on high blood pressure medication are on it because their blood pressure is often low. And if you clean up what you're eating and your insulin levels get better, high insulin, which is common in many people who are overweight or in early, even in late stages of type 2 diabetes, have high insulins. Except you have insulin resistance and the insulin doesn't work. But high insulin circulating around in the body increases the retention of fluid, of sodium, and then retention of fluid, and your blood pressure goes up. So if you're correcting all that, there can be a stage where you no longer need the blood pressure medicine, but if you take it, it's going to drop you too low. And we don't want you to get dizzy, weak, lightheaded, anything like that when you're driving. So we ask people that you have to monitor your blood pressure. And even when you're off your medication, if you get off, not everybody does, some people get on a lower dose. And we don't know at what stage that's going to happen. It's not like when you lower your carbs and your blood sugar drops that day. Blood pressure can take weeks or months. But in the meantime, you have to keep measuring and monitoring. We would tell people if you're getting close to a blood pressure of 100, top number's 100, you really have to look at your dose. Is probably going to be problematic, and talk to your doctor about tapering your dose.
My question is it unhealthy to eat a high-fat diet if you are not in ketosis?
I think it's unhealthy to eat a high-fat diet if you're also eating a high-carbohydrate diet, which is our standard diet. No, we used to get people on higher levels. Ketosis generally occurs if you're on 50 grams of carbohydrate or less. At the Atkins Center, we would have some people on higher levels of that as their maintenance diet, and their labs were fine.
But so if you cut your carbs, but you haven't cut them enough to get into ketosis, but you're eating a high healthy fat diet, is that considered?
As long as you're not gaining weight. But remember, if you have cut your carbs to the level that keeps your chemistry even, your blood sugar stable, your hunger under control, you just eat the fat that comes with your food. You don't have to be pushing any extra fat.
I have a question about, I'm very insulin resistant. I've had gastric bypass surgery, lost 100 pounds. That was 12 years ago, and I've gained 20 pounds, but that's not, I understand when people have had gastric bypass surgery, that's not too much, but I still can't lose the other poundage I need to lose. And so how do I combat the insulin resistance? I've been on ketogenic diet most of the last year.
Have you been on 20 grams total?
Yes, and I'm
Okay.
wondering if I need to go lower.
Well, what some people do is they do some intermittent fasting.
Okay.
I didn't really very much believe in that until recently. Our refrigerator died on December 2nd. And we still don't, our insurance company is still fighting with it. So I decided I was going to try intermittent fasting. And I was surprised at the results. So instead of eating a little bit for breakfast, which I used to do, and then have a light lunch and then dinner at 6:30, and then not eat anything until that little bit of breakfast, I just stopped eating that little bit of breakfast. And I found out that I actually feel good. My ketones skyrocketed, whereas before they were just, and they should have been high, but they weren't. And my blood sugar is better, because I used to get, if I skipped meals, I would get somewhat hypoglycemic. I'd get a little irritable and shaky, and if I went too long, that hasn't happened. And I'm wondering if it's because I have such a high amount of ketones now. And I've started to lose more inches. So that could be something you could try to break that. And if you are someone like that, even once you break that, you're probably going to pretty much have to stay maximum of 20 grams total.
Okay.
Because you are so insulin resistant. And I mean, I've had people who did a gastric bypass and 5 years later, they gained all their weight back and more.
Right.
So the fact that I think you've kept it to 20 is actually better than a lot of people do.
Well, yeah, I did. This metformin thing, I just talked to my nurse practitioner. I said, my A1C has been below 7 for years, and why am I still on this? And she said, well, it has other benefits.
Yeah, well, it does have an impact on insulin resistance. And our goal for an A1C for someone with diabetes is to be certainly lower than 7.
Yeah, it's between 6.3 and 6.7.
No, ours is to get you in the low 5s.
Well, I would love that.
Yeah. So, I mean, Dr. Atkins used metformin and he kept people on it. Dr. Westman stops people, though, with it too, but it depends upon if you still have a need, and if you tolerate it. You know, if you, then if I were you, I would rather stay on it than not. So, do you know that your thyroid works okay?
No, I have Hashimoto's.
Oh, okay.
I have lots of.
And you're treated for that?
I am treated, and I'm in a much better shape than I was 15 years ago when it was diagnosed.
Yeah, I would just keep doing what you're doing. And see if intermittent fasting works. I've had other people who came to heal who do intermittent fasting before they came to us. And for them, that sometimes really helped to get them past their set point.
There is a way to break through this insulin resistance over time.
It may be over time, but it can take a long time.
It's been
Because you've had it for a long time too. And there could be, other factors like stress or whatever else may be an issue. I don't want you to have to tell your whole history, but if you're on any other meds, you'd have to check whether some of those meds can be an issue.
Well, the big thing is since November I've been diagnosed with AFib, and I had a cardioversion a while ago. It lasted for 5 days. Now they've upped my meds, and I'm having another one Thursday.
Oh, okay. Well, good luck with that. I hope it
Thanks.
works.
Yeah.
Yeah, but whatever drug you're on, you might want to check on the internet and see if it has an impact on weight or blood sugar.
Okay, yeah, my blood sugar hadn't gone up, I can tell, I'm fine.
Okay. The lady at this table, then we'll get to back here.
I'm a keto success. I've lost 70 pounds and I only got about 10 more to lose.
Oh, congratulations. Wonderful.
How do you work maintenance? What are the rules for that?
Well, first of all, I would prefer that most people would stay at a ketogenic level in maintenance because it looks like there can be benefits of ketones for your brain. It's a cleaner burning fuel than glucose is. You have less oxidative stress. And other reasons that we don't yet quite understand, but we're still wondering, is there an association with Alzheimer's and all of that? So that may mean that you want to stay below 50. But if you want to be a little more, have you been on 20 grams total this whole time? Then you very slowly start increasing your vegetables. The same choices, not starchy stuff. But if you want more salad, you want more vegetables. If you want, add a little bit of berries, starting like just twice a week. But what you want to watch for is that it doesn't trigger hunger and cravings, and you don't lose control. For me, maintenance is still around 20 or 25, sometimes 30 grams a day. Because if I have more than that, my body doesn't tolerate it anymore. When I was younger, I could have more, but I can't now. So you really have to find the level that works for you, but I would still recommend that people stay pretty ketogenic.
There is no longer a concern of too high protein and the effect on
that was a myth I heard in 1974, and it's still hanging around. I'm sorry, I should be repeating it. Is there a danger of high protein? First of all, if you're following advice and eating until you're satisfied, you're not really going to be eating very high protein. Because you cannot eat very high amounts of protein for very long. You don't feel well. And you're stuffed. I don't know what you mean by high protein, but the amount of protein most people eat on a ketogenic diet isn't high, it's more moderate. And no, it doesn't damage kidneys. Even in people with diabetes, they would tell people with diabetes because kidney damage is very common in people, especially with long-term diabetes. But where the damage comes from is not protein in their diet. It's from high blood sugars that damages the protein in their kidneys. So if you're eating just normal amounts of protein and you're not stuffing yourself, there's no risk to that. In fact, there was just a study, and I can't remember where it was done, but it was something I read just a few weeks ago, where they put people actually on high protein diets, very high protein diets. and there was no change in their kidney function. So that's been a myth, and I won't go through the story of how they created that myth, but that's a myth.
Question number 2, is there any downside to coconut oil? And is there, besides exposure to too much of it, is there anything that you know as a downside?
The only one I know is too many calories. Is there a downside to coconut oil? I mean, it has been found anecdotally to be helpful with memory. And Dr. Mary Newport, I don't remember her name. Maybe I need some coconut oil. Dr. Mary Newport used it with her husband who had actually premature Alzheimer's, and he improved for a period of time. He ultimately passed away. I would do it. I mean, I have it at home and I often forget to use it. Questions? Did I answer them all? Oh, one more here.
I want to know about water. Like, how much water do you need to drink?
Oh, I think if you don't get in 8-ounce glasses a day, it's going to be terrible. That's what we used to tell people. Remember, you get a lot of water from your food. So, Dr. Westman says, eat when you're hungry and drink when you're thirsty. Yes, Eric? Yes. Keep it simple. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, one last minute one. We have a straggler. Well, you don't really want to start kids out with getting addicted to carbs, and unfortunately our kids are, because they're very unhealthy. When you start seeing 8-year-old little kids that are obese with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and hypertension and on statin drugs, and they're starting to actually do some of that. Keeping kids on whole, real foods, and if they're heavy already, what you want to do is try to cut their carbs slowly, so hopefully they don't miss it too much, and have them grow into the excess weight they have. I used to not focus, especially with little girls, on the scale. I would talk to them about being able to wear the clothes their friends wore, or being able to run the way they could, and this is going to help you to do that, but not to fixate on numbers on the scale. And also to keep them from not getting addicted to, which is hard to do, but there's information on the internet about how to hide healthier foods for kids in other foods that you can make, and if they don't eat their vegetables and things like that. But just try to make sure you can get some protein in them and get them very slowly to cut down, and including fruit juice. The kids shouldn't be doing fruit juice. Okay, thank you very much. It was very much fun to be here. Thank you.
I need to go back there just for a second. And this is for the people online who may have joined us later. And I was hoping to see that number go up. I found at healclinics.com/offering. Oh, right here. You can actually see that 328 people have invested in the Heal Diabetes Clinics as of this moment. Thank you. And the total amount raised so far of a goal of 1 million is 328,000. So thank you for that. And so I've asked the hotel to lock the doors until we get up to 500,000. Now, for those of you who don't know me, this is very out of character. And in fact, I saw a few of you in the clinic just a few moments ago. So, the whole idea is to get access for other people and your family, your friends, to have access to this information at a distance. If you don't have medical problems, in the clinic for safety purposes, if you do have medical problems. So. Thanks again, Jackie, for helping with Heal Clinics. And I wonder, a lot of people have remarked to me that they heard my story of going up to the Atkins Center and all that, but they liked hearing your side of the story when
you were in that study?
Yeah, so.
You don't mean when I was first hired by Bob?
No.
Oh, good.
When you first heard about me.
Oh, okay. My office was down the hall from Dr. Atkins. And he had this habit, even though I was with patients, if he had something, if he was excited about something, he'd just open the door and walk in. And so one morning, he came in and he was all excited. You sent him a letter, didn't you first? Yeah, he got a letter from Eric explaining that, he wanted to learn about how to do the diet, and there was no research that he could find about your diet. And we know there wouldn't be because they would never publish anything with Dr. Atkins' name. And he wanted to come up to New York City to see if he could learn how to do the diet so he could do study. So Bob comes running in, and he says, "Oh, you'll never believe what I just got." And I said, "No, Bob, what did you just get?" "I got this letter. There's a doctor who wants to do a study and get it published on the diet." And he said, "You'll never guess where he's from." "Well, no, yes, Bob. Duke University." Well, I was impressed. So, we made the appointment, and Eric came up with the nurse practitioner, PA, the two, I don't remember their names, but they're very sweet people. And Eric was very gentlemanly, as he always is. And he sat in with Dr. Atkins and sat in with me, and I went over the charts and all of that. And then we met in the conference room and talked about how you do the diet and all the issues and answered his questions. And to my surprise, he actually went back and was putting together the study. And I don't remember, I came down to meet some of the people in the study a year or so after you got into doing it. And it was wonderful done. What, you have 200 people, 150? I don't remember how many you
First
had.
one was only 50.
Oh, it seemed like more. Okay. And we came down and met, and it was really nice. And then that was how Eric really opened up this whole thing about research. And Bob and I never thought he'd get it published. We were sure he would never get it published. But in 2002, he got it published. And so Bob and I were very happy to be able to teach Eric how to do the program. And we were very happy that he wanted to do it correctly. Because there have been studies done by other people who didn't do it correctly. And then, of course, the media headline is Jacqueline's diet doesn't work and it's dangerous. So, is that what you...
Yeah. Just reflecting on that whole story, and we were the only group, Will Yancey and I, who's my colleague at Duke, who thought to ask another doctor for assistance in doing a study. All of the other studies were researchers who just kind of read a book about it, took the Atkins book or some other book. They'd never done a study, they'd never seen a patient in a clinic about the diet. And so when you look back of the round of 20 studies that were low carb, low fat, the one that Yancey is the first author, and it had the best results because we actually talked to a doctor and a nurse and a whole staff who had experience with the program. And looking back, why would it, well, I was a doctor myself. Most of these other researchers were PhDs who were scared of fat themselves, and then being a son of a doctor, I valued that a doctor may have learned something over their clinical practice. In fact, my father was in a university setting and created a great clinic, and then when he retired, the clinic went away. Similar kind of story. But looking back, it was really important to learn, carry the baton or stand on the shoulders of, I don't know how you say it, but we tried to learn as much as we could from other people before we started the research. And I'm glad that we did. And if there's one description, that I can be tenacious. And that's kind of a Duke thing where, by gosh, I'm going to get that published somewhere. Although the first time we put the first paper into JAMA, which is the highest level journal, it came back with a very interesting review. It said no, reject, but it also said we're not used to having studies funded by doctors. Because I said, you know, it's funded by Dr. Robert C. Atkins in New York City, but it's not a scientific thing, right? So it's where the funding comes from is less important than what the actual results show. But we finally got it published, and then the second one, which was a randomized trial, which is the highest level of experimental research you can do, was in a higher level journal. And, you know, in any, well, actually, so looking back, I was thinking also that you said, and Dr. Atkins said, no one had ever asked to do a study. So there have been 30 years where nobody ever even asked the people who were experts in this area to do a study. So there was actually a taboo of studying this, meaning, you know, there's no like law against it, but a social taboo, meaning the researchers just wouldn't go there. And I actually had no deep idea that I was getting into this terrible area. And actually my ignorance of nutrition was helpful in that regard. But the science now has come so far forward since then, and yet most people are unaware of that. So we do a lot of teaching about that science, and thanks for recalling that.
Well, over the years, before Eric showed up and left his ego at the door, he was willing to learn and listen, and he, I mean, during the study, he called me up and asked my advice or whatever. Most doctors, again, don't do that, but Bob had many times before said, my door is open. You can come in and go through my records. You can see the kind of results we get. But all people wanted to do was denigrate him and criticize him. And no one ever took him up on it, and Eric did. Someone had a question. Gentlemen?
Is the Atkins diet a keto diet? And if not, what's the difference?
Yeah, what's the difference?
You know, his whole low-carb keto was in Atkins. If you get below 50 grams of carbohydrate, you have ketones. And Dr. Atkins started his patients on 20 grams, the same as we do at HEAL. And you're in ketosis, and it's a low-carb diet. I think a lot of what's happened is people who are jumping on the bandwagon, they don't want to use the name Atkins. They don't want to admit that they're standing on his shoulders. He's the one who sensitized people to ketones. Now, he got roundly criticized for it and was accused of murdering people and things like that. But it's basically Atkins. If someone may tweak it a little bit, they like to have a more updated name because Atkins is old-fashioned, I guess. But it's if you're below 50 grams, you're on a low-carb keto diet.
No, thank you. Talk about Atkins Nutrition.
Oh, well, yeah. Atkins Nutritionals is still a functioning food company. They have kind of lost their way from where Dr. Atkins started. Their products are for young people, active people. You look at their commercials, and the advice they give is really, they want to stay away from any controversy about Atkins because they don't want it to affect their name. And so there are a lot of people, and I worked with them for 2 years, from 03 to 05, writing a book and educating people. But a lot of low-carb people just don't trust their products because they put a lot of things in there that we wouldn't be happy with.
Some people think the Atkins diet is the Atkins product.
Well, yeah. Some people think you can't do the Atkins diet unless you use the products. Now, we did that for 20 years before there were any products. So, no, you don't, in fact, I don't really like people using a lot of keto products. We want you to eat whole food and learn how to eat whole food.
So I'm interested in what prompted Dr. Westman to be interested.
That's an interesting story.
What propelled you to investigate this and find out about it?
Yeah, so my background is I'm an internal medicine specialist, and I came through Stanford University, University of Wisconsin, University of Kentucky, and then came to Duke to learn how to do clinical research. So I'm a biostatistician by training, master's level, And while I was taking care of my own clinic population here at the Durham Veterans Affairs Hospital, 2 of my patients came in. Turns out about the time when there was a republication of the New Atkins Diet Revolution. And they had lost all this weight, and I was very curious because no one lost weight in my clinic, and I was a preventive-minded internist. I sent just about everyone to my dietitian down the hall at the VA, very well funded, and there was no success. And so it was remarkable that these two men, because I had one woman in my practice at the VA at the time in the early mid-90s. So these 2 people lose weight doing a steak and egg diet, doing a weird kind of taking carbohydrates away from the food. And I'm curious, and this can't be a good thing, and I was skeptical. And so one of the patients, asked me, well, why are you worried about it? And I said, well, your cholesterol, of course. It's going to be worse. I mean, I finally read the book, and you eat more fat, and your cholesterol is going to go up. And he looked at me and goes, well, why don't you check it? I thought, well, okay. The labs down the hall, nobody has to pay for the labs, it's at the VA. And the cholesterol levels are all good. But even if you look at it the old way, the new way, and one time is fine, lightning can strike somewhere. But I had a similar patient, similar story, they lose weight on the Atkins diet. I checked the cholesterol and it was good, better again. So 2 in a row, if something can't happen, and I see 2 things that happen, I'm not so overtrained that I ignored what was happening in front of me. And I've heard that recalled by someone saying, I remember you saying that. So it was, again, valuing that clinical encounter as a source of information, which goes back historically to the beginning of what doctors used to do, which is, treating patients. And so that was still important to me. So seeing these patients, seeing what everyone thought would be the worst thing happen, cholesterol getting worse, but they actually got better, led me to investigating it further. What would any good young clinical research doctor do? Well, track down who was using it and get information and study it. And that's how I got into it. At the time, all the other low-carb doctors had retired. So Dr. Mike and Mary Dan Eads, whom I got to know really well, they wrote Protein Power. They were in a practice in the Midwest, but they had retired. And so the only doctor that I could find easily was the Dr. Atkins and Jackie's clinic in New York City. And so it was really kind of curiosity and also seeing, I remember thinking, these people did it without me. If it's safe, this is fantastic. This is going to be huge. This is going to change everything, right? So it was the same skepticism about the safety that still people have today. And so we do a lot of unlearning and teaching and education about the safety of this. And I didn't just go and start doing this. It's been now 20 years since those first visits and the patients in front of me doing this. So I'm here to reassure you and yet
Besides,
you don't.
You've been practicing this all those years.
Right. Well, then the
Yourself,
research
personally.
8 years, and then now the clinical practice for 12 years at Duke. And we're one of now these 2 or 3 university practices that use a keto diet as the treatment of obesity and diabetes. So it's a start, but to say we've gone from 1 now to 3 academic medical centers is a slow start. And I'm trying to also persuade you to do something else other than to wait for the medical mainstream to change, because that's not a very fast change. So get involved in a program, a company. You're not giving away money, you're buying stock in it, that will actually allow this to be available to people now. So that what I've learned is not to bang my head on the doors of organizations that have other vested interests in mind. At Duke, the obesity medicine world is dominated by the surgical approach. And this is true with the other academic medical centers, even other hospitals, because they make more money on using bariatric surgery to treat people than they do with a program like this. So that's totally financially driven, and it's not fair. Why wait for those powers to be there? We can do it on our own. Thanks for the question.
Do we have time for one more question?
One more.
Eileen?
I just wondered if you could touch on the difference between the total carbs and the net.
The difference between net carbs and total carbs. A number of years ago, and I think the Atkins company actually had an important role in deciding to do some research and say that if you subtract the fiber from a food, that fiber doesn't get absorbed, therefore you shouldn't have to count it. And they also would not subtract the sugar alcohols. And there are sugar alcohols that 40% of them are absorbed. But to get net carbs, you subtract the sugar alcohols in a food product, because that was really what was behind it, is some of their bars and shakes and things like that, is to subtract the sugar alcohols and the fiber, because they supposedly don't have an impact on the body, and it's so many net carbs. Whereas if you leave that stuff in, the total carbs go higher, and we want you on 20 total, and that's not going to come from the products. It's going to come from your salad and the little cheese and some of the cream and the olives and the vegetables. And we think that's the best place to start to suppress your hunger and cravings and to start correcting your metabolism. And a lot of people, some people can have net carbs. You know, if you're young and a good metabolism and you're active, you can do net carbs and you might do well. But most of the people that we see, and that people have really out of balance metabolisms, need to start stricter, and it's total carbs. So you don't get to subtract fiber or the sugar alcohols from the product.
Another way to say it is that it's not wrong, it's just different. And so net carbs is like the over-the-counter medicine. It does a 200 milligram of ibuprofen help for pain? Sometimes, so net carbs can work, but the total carb method is this prescription strength. So, and so, if you have a pain that one ibuprofen doesn't help for, then you go see the doctor for the stronger medicine. The thing is, these are diets, not medicines, and the allowance for other products is, I think, what was behind the net carb generation. And so stick to total carbs. I'll see people who do net carbs and, it doesn't work, and then we explain the total and it starts working. And it erases a lot of the other stuff. Although some of the total carb, some of the products out there can be useful with, especially like the chocolate shakes. Protein chocolate shakes, because I figured out you have to get protein somehow. Yeah. I mean, chocolate somehow. So if you want a successful program long term, you got to figure out this chocolate thing. And so anyway, that's the difference. So we prefer total carb as the way to go. Yeah. Thank you, Amber. Do you want to close out? Or?
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Dr. Westman. We welcome you again, and we're very happy that you guys came out tonight. We're very excited about next month. We'll have another special guest. So keep watching. We'll announce on the Heal Clinic's Facebook page and the Dr. Westman's Low Carb Support Group Facebook page the next day. I believe it's February 5th, I believe. That's the first Tuesday of the month. I know we're on the second Tuesday this month, but next month we'll be back to our regular first Tuesday. Thank you again for coming tonight, and don't forget to leave your little drawing forms on the table, and we'll pick those up. Thank you.